Before we begin, a quick heads up, viewer discretion is advised. This video is meant for entertainment. What started as a typical night on late-night TV, a well-known guest, a charming host, a crowd full of laughs, quickly turned into one of the most unforgettable showdowns ever aired. Inside the Ed Sullivan Theater, everything buzzed with energy. Excited fans filled their seats, clutching their tickets like golden passes to a night of laughs. The band rehearsed its final notes. Producers whispered through headsets. Cameras adjusted angles. Crew members rushed to get every detail just right. The lights, the sound, and the building excitement all hinted at another easy win for Stephen Colbert. Then walked in the guest of the night, Denzel Washington. Academy Award winner. Director. Hollywood legend. His presence alone commanded attention. Calm and confident, he entered with his usual charm, flashing a kind smile and shaking hands as cheers filled the room. For many, this was the moment they had come for, watching one of the greatest actors of our time sit across from one of TV's quickest minds. On paper, it seemed perfect. Colbert, known for his liberal stance and witty interviews. Denzel, a seasoned performer admired for his work and his strong sense of values. Two men, with very different worldviews, sharing one stage. A collision seemed possible, but no one saw it coming. The audience expected a fun, light-hearted hour, some jokes, a bit of promotion for Denzel's new movie. What they got instead was a breakdown of an interview, a host visibly shaken, and a guest who left with grace, his dignity untouched. As the lights dimmed and the theme song rolled, Colbert stepped onto the stage. His monologue was sharp and well-crafted, packed with political jabs that had the crowd laughing. It felt like a normal night. But the real drama hadn't started yet. This wasn't going to be just entertainment. It was about to become something much deeper. What happened next left Colbert rattled, the audience stunned, and the internet on fire. This was the moment that broke the unspoken rules of late-night TV. And now, you'll have to decide, did Colbert push too far, or did Denzel show us what real integrity looks like? Before we get into it, make sure you hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Whose side are you on? Because after watching this, you'll understand why this moment is still talked about today. Denzel didn't come for a fight. He wasn't there to argue. He was simply promoting his newest film, a project already getting praise from critics. The movie focused on themes like forgiveness, redemption, and second chances, messages close to Denzel's heart. It reflected his own beliefs, shaped by faith, discipline, and perseverance. For him, this interview was just another stop in a busy press tour: smile, answer some questions, mention the release date, and move on. But behind the scenes, something different was brewing. Sources later shared that Colbert's team had spent hours crafting questions that were direct, even confrontational. These weren't about filmmaking or performances. They were meant to put Denzel on the spot, especially about his Christian faith and his more conservative values. Colbert, aware of what his audience enjoyed, allegedly told his team, "Let's push him. Let's aim for something that might go viral." By the time Denzel's car arrived at the theater, the stage was already set. At first, everything looked typical. The loud applause when Denzel walked on. The firm handshake. The laughs when Colbert joked about Denzel's intense work ethic. For a few minutes, it felt safe. Two professionals talking about a movie, a crowd enjoying the banter. But then, things shifted. Colbert leaned in with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "So Denzel," he began, "your film is about forgiveness and redemption. Considering your faith background, how much of your personal belief influenced this story?" It sounded like a reasonable question. Denzel leaned in slightly, calm and thoughtful. His voice was steady. "Faith, in any form, gives us a way to understand forgiveness," he said. "The character in this story has made serious mistakes, but he's trying to make things right. That's something anyone can relate to." The crowd nodded and murmured in agreement. It was the kind of sincere, grounded answer people had come to expect from him. But Colbert wasn't done. He leaned closer, eyes sharp. Sure, but isn't there some irony in actors, people who live in a world of fantasy, preaching moral values to the public? The energy in the room changed. Denzel's smile faded just a bit. His publicist, watching from backstage, shifted nervously. Denzel answered calmly. I wouldn't call it preaching. If you have a platform, you should be honest about who you are. I'm not telling anyone what to believe, but I won't hide my values either. It was clear, composed. But it wasn't the headline Colbert was chasing. So he went further. But what about topics your faith community focuses on? Things like marriage equality, women's rights, religion's role in government. You've stayed pretty quiet about those, haven't you? The room got heavy. Chairs creaked. Breaths held. What started as a film promo now felt like an interrogation. Yet Denzel stayed calm. His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained level. My faith teaches love, not judgment. I talk about respect, hard work, family. I'm not a lawmaker. I'm an actor, sharing stories. It was honest. It was measured. But it wasn't enough for Colbert. What had started as a simple film discussion now felt like a subtle trap. This wasn't about promoting a movie anymore. Colbert wasn't after answers. He was looking for a moment that would explode online. The conversation slowly veered away from storytelling and into much deeper waters. Leaning forward on his desk, Colbert's tone changed. It wasn't playful anymore. It was firm, almost like a courtroom. Let's get specific, he said, letting the silence settle just long enough to stir discomfort across the audience. You've talked openly about your Christian beliefs. That's fine. But where exactly do you stand on the big topics your faith community is always vocal about? Marriage equality, reproductive rights, religion in politics. Don't people deserve a clear answer from you? It hit like a surprise blow. The audience, which had been laughing minutes ago, now sat in still silence. The usual fun rhythm of late-night TV was gone. This had turned into something unfiltered. But Denzel didn't budge. His hands stayed still on the chair's armrests, posture upright, voice calm. He looked Colbert in the eye and answered plainly. My faith teaches love, Stephen. Not judgment. When I speak about values, I mean respecting others, working hard, caring for your family, even when people disagree with you. I'm not here to write laws or run for office. I'm here as an actor, a director, a man sharing what guides me. His response was solid, grounded, but it wasn't the kind of soundbite Colbert was chasing. Colbert leaned in even closer. But staying silent is still taking a side, isn't it? You can't talk about morals and faith, and then refuse to speak out on today's biggest issues. That's trying to play both sides. A nervous stir rippled through the audience. Half gasps, half quiet shuffling in their seats. They had expected entertainment. Instead, they were watching something that felt like a confrontation. Backstage, Denzel's publicist looked visibly anxious, one hand near her phone, ready in case this spiraled out of control. She could see that this wasn't what her client had been promised. Denzel's jaw tightened slightly, the first real sign of pressure, but his voice held steady. You're asking me to fit my relationship with God into political boxes. That's not how faith works. My duty isn't to take sides. It's to live with honesty and let my work, on screen and off, reflect what I stand for. For a moment, everything went still. No applause. No jokes. Just the sharp weight of his words hanging in the air. It was the clear difference between these two men. Colbert was searching for a reaction, a viral moment built on tension. Denzel stood his ground with grace and strength, refusing to be dragged into a political argument. That contrast became clearer with each passing second. One man pushing to shape the moment, the other standing firm in his principles. But then Colbert crossed the line too far. So you're saying that choosing not to speak on civil rights is the same as respecting others? That's your position? His voice was edged, almost eager, like he was waiting for Denzel to make a mistake. And then, everything shifted. That famous Denzel smile, so often seen in interviews, red carpets, and press events, vanished. Gone was the Hollywood charm. In its place was a new tone, focused, serious, unwavering. The moment had turned. With just that question, Colbert stepped into dangerous ground, and the exchange that followed left the whole room silent. Inside the Ed Sullivan Theater, it suddenly felt heavier. Each breath seemed louder, the stage stripped of its usual lightness. Colbert wasn't cracking jokes anymore. His voice turned sharper, insistent. "Come on, Denzel," he pushed. "You can't sit here and talk about faith, values, redemption, and then avoid the issues that actually matter. Isn't that avoiding your moral responsibility?" This wasn't a real question. It was a pointed accusation. For the first time, Denzel adjusted his seat, not from nerves, but with purpose. He stared back, calm but with an unmistakable firmness in his tone. "Are you here to talk about my movie, Stephen, or are you trying to win points?" That sentence hit like thunder. The audience let out a shaky, confused laugh, the kind of laugh that comes when no one knows if it's safe to react. A few clapped, others didn't move. The power dynamic had just shifted. Colbert looked surprised. But instead of stepping back, he doubled down, sounding almost defensive now. "I'm trying to have an honest conversation. You have influence, a voice. When you bring faith into the public space, you invite these questions. If you stay quiet on things like equality or women's rights, that's not neutrality, that's being complicit." That word, complicit, hung in the air like smoke. It was harsh, it stung. And it painted Denzel not as a guest, but almost like a defendant. The mood had changed completely. Denzel leaned forward this time, his voice quieter but somehow stronger. "Complicity," he said, "is when you force people into narrow roles just to make headlines. My work shows what I believe. My values speak clearly. I don't need to play along in your political drama." That line cracked through the tension. The crowd clapped, first scattered, then louder, more certain. Some still sat frozen, unsure, but the energy had clearly changed. Colbert tried to keep talking, but the applause made him pause. The moment no longer belonged to him. And that's the risk with this kind of strategy. In media, it's called host cornering, when a host tries to trap a guest into a yes or no answer, a place where any response can be spun. Sometimes it creates viral clips. But when the guest doesn't fall into the trap, it can backfire, badly. That was happening now. Colbert's voice got sharper, but he was losing his rhythm. Washington, on the other hand, stayed calm. His refusal to react only made the tension more obvious. "You can't sit here and claim moral authority through faith, then stay silent on the most important issues of our time," Colbert continued, his voice rising, almost pleading. But Denzel didn't blink. His response was clear, sharp, and final. "I don't present myself as a moral authority, Stephen. I'm not a politician. I don't make laws. I'm an actor, a director, and a man of faith. What I share comes from my personal life, not a political agenda." His words were clean and direct. The room responded with scattered clapping. Some in the audience remained still, stunned by the unexpected intensity. The usual rhythm of late-night setups, punchlines, applause, was gone. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It felt like a standoff. A public debate playing out live. Backstage, Washington's publicist stood right at the edge of the curtain, clearly ready to act if things got worse. Her face was tight with concern. This moment had moved far from the original plan. In the control room, producers exchanged panicked looks. No one was sure what to do, and no one dared cut the feed. On stage, the two men were locked in. One struggling to control the conversation, the other holding firm with calm defiance. The crowd wasn't clapping on cue. They weren't laughing. They were watching something raw, something real. This was no longer a simple talk show. It had become something else entirely. The tension had stretched to its limit. The room was thick with silence, almost too heavy to breathe. Then, Colbert, clearly frustrated and boxed in by Denzel's composure, threw out a word that pushed everything over the edge. "You're being a coward, Denzel!" Gasps filled the theater. The word hit too hard, too personal. This wasn't a question. It was an insult. And it happened live. Denzel's eyes narrowed. The calm mask he had worn all evening began to harden. He leaned in, each word deliberate. "Cowardice," he said slowly, "is hiding behind comedy when what you're really doing is trying to attack someone." It landed like a direct blow. The audience froze, stunned. They had come for laughs, not for this. But what they were seeing now was something much deeper, an intense, real moment on live television. Colbert shifted in his seat, his hands twitching nervously with the cue cards. He tried to force a smile, but it looked brittle, uncertain. He was losing control, and the audience could feel it. Then, Denzel spoke the line that chilled the entire room. "Do not throw pearls before swine." The biblical reference struck with the weight of a gavel. Sharp, cold, and unshakable. The entire studio went silent. No laughs. No applause. Even the band didn't play. They sat still, as if even they knew the gravity of what had just been said. Colbert blinked. He looked rattled. For the first time that night, he had no comeback, no witty reply, no last-minute joke to soften the blow. Both men stood up. Colbert did so out of desperation, Denzel out of firm resolve. They faced each other as the cameras rolled, capturing every angle of a moment that felt more like a duel than a TV segment. The audience leaned forward, holding their breath. They knew they were witnessing something rare, an on-air collapse of a late-night tradition. But Denzel didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. He didn't lecture. His words came clear and controlled, with purpose. And this time, he didn't speak to Colbert. He looked straight into the camera. To the millions of viewers at home. His tone was steady, direct. "I came here tonight to talk about a film I believe in. A story about hope, redemption, and forgiveness. I'm sorry that this turned into something else. That's not on me. That's not who I am. If you want to see the story, if you want to be moved by something meaningful, the film comes out this Friday. I hope it speaks to you." It was sharp. It was respectful. It was devastating. In that one statement, Denzel didn't just take back the moment. He exposed how far the host had fallen from the idea of honest conversation. Colbert still stood, his face frozen, torn between anger and embarrassment. His hands twitched slightly, like he wanted to say something to recover, to fix what had just happened. But there was nothing left to say. The audience sat in stunned silence. Then, slowly, applause began to build. Soft at first, then louder. But it wasn't for Colbert. It was for Denzel. The cameras caught it all. The host, left powerless. The guest, walking away with his head high. Denzel stepped away from the chair, gave a short nod to the audience, and walked off stage. The applause followed him, growing louder, becoming a thunderous wave that filled the studio. The band still didn't play. The laughs never returned. Colbert sat at his desk, cards slightly shaking in his hands. He looked out at a crowd that no longer seemed entertained. He had lost the guest, the moment, and the room. And everyone watching at home knew it. After Washington's final words, a deep silence hung in the theater, like smoke that refused to lift. For a moment, no one, on stage or off, knew what to do. Colbert stood frozen at his desk, flipping his cards in nervous bursts, his eyes darting toward the wings where Denzel had just exited. All the polished timing, the confidence, the practiced charm, it was gone. He didn't look like a host anymore. He looked like a man who had just lost control of his own stage. Behind the scenes, producers waved frantically, trying to signal their next move. In the control room, voices overlapped in panic. Cut to commercial! Stay on him! What do we do now? A show built on perfect timing had turned into chaos in seconds. Colbert tried to recover. He forced a thin smile that barely held together. Well, he muttered, voice low and cracking. That was something. A few scattered chuckles broke out, more from discomfort than amusement. But the tension in the room didn't ease. And then, just before leaving earshot, Denzel turned back. His voice steady. His words sharp. This is not journalism, he said, looking straight at Colbert. It's a hit job with better lighting. The words hit like a hammer. The audience gasped. Then came the silence again, thick, suffocating. No music. No applause. No laugh track. Just the weight of a sentence no one could ignore. Denzel walked off stage, his footsteps echoing in the still room. The audience didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They just sat there, quiet, processing what they had just seen. It was like a collective breath held in shock. They knew they had witnessed something more than TV. Something real. Back at the desk, Colbert sank into his chair. His face pale, his posture slumped. He flipped his cards again, looking for something to ground himself, but nothing came. In his earpiece, producers shouted over each other, trying to figure out how to salvage the segment. Pivot. Change course. Move on. But nothing worked. The unspoken rule between host, guest, and audience had been shattered. That rule is simple. The guest plays along, the host keeps things light with humor, and the audience enjoys the show. But if one person refuses the script, if a guest decides not to go along, everything breaks down. And when it does, the audience stops seeing a performance. They start seeing a real conflict. That's what made this moment so shocking. It wasn't just that Colbert lost control of his guest. It was that the illusion was gone. The comfortable mask of late-night comedy had cracked, and the truth slipped out for everyone to see. Denzel didn't explode. He didn't shout. He didn't storm off in anger. He simply stayed grounded, spoke clearly, and left with his integrity intact. Colbert, on the other hand, remained in his chair, holding trembling cards, staring at a crowd that no longer laughed on cue. Between them sat the truth, that when real dignity meets forced performance, it's the performance that crumbles. But the moment didn't end when Denzel walked out. That was only the beginning. Because the real storm broke outside the theater. Within minutes of Denzel's exit, clips of the confrontation lit up social media. The hashtag Denzel walks out shot to the top of trending lists around the world. People were watching and sharing the clip before the episode had even finished airing. The internet exploded. Memes flooded platforms like Twitter and TikTok. Most painted Washington as calm, wise, and composed. Colbert, on the other hand, was portrayed as desperate and outmatched. News headlines followed quickly. Washington walks, Colbert crumbles, Faith versus Fury, late night's most explosive interview. By the next morning, the fallout was clear. Colbert's ratings took a sudden hit, the biggest drop since his show first aired. Sponsors began contacting the network, worried about how this would reflect on their brands. No one wanted to be connected to a moment the internet was calling a televised ambush. Major newspapers joined in. Critics questioned Colbert's methods, saying he had crossed a line from satire into aggression. And what about Washington? He stayed silent. Outside a hotel in Manhattan, a reporter called out, asking about the controversy. Denzel didn't rant. He didn't criticize. He simply replied, "I wish Mr. Colbert well." That was it. No drama. No victory lap. Just quiet dignity. And that made the contrast even clearer. On one side, a host unraveling under pressure, losing the very control that made his job work. On the other, a guest who walked away stronger, more respected than when he entered. The cost of going too far was obvious. Colbert lost credibility. He lost the audience's trust. But Denzel gained something far more powerful: clarity. He showed that strength doesn't always come through confrontation. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than anything else. And in this case, it was deafening. The walkout didn't just become a headline, it turned into a case study. Media schools broke it down. Commentators debated every second. Viewers remembered it as the night late-night comedy came face-to-face with something real, truth without a script. Two lasting images remained. One, Colbert, visibly shaken, fumbling for control as the show slipped through his fingers. The other, Washington, walking off stage calm and composed, turning a hostile exchange into a lesson in self-restraint. And there was no way to avoid the takeaway. In the world of talk shows, controversy can boost views. But without mutual respect, it destroys trust. Hosts may chase viral clips, but it's the guests who stay authentic that earn lasting respect. Denzel didn't argue. He didn't try to win a debate. He simply refused to lose his composure. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching of something more powerful than any soundbite or headline. Real strength doesn't need to shout. The real impact of that moment wasn't written by critics. It was written in the silent tension inside the theater, and in the noise online afterward. The audience saw the difference between performance and presence. One man was left standing with his values. The other was left alone on a stage, holding cards, trying to catch up.